Imagine this: you're standing in the middle of a vast, empty forest. The silence around you is heavy, almost suffocating. You call out their name, your voice trembling, breaking under the weight of rejection. But there's no answer. The only thing that echoes back is the gnawing sound of doubt and heartbreak. You're not just calling for them, you're crying out for validation, for a sign that you still matter, for anything that can fill the emptiness they've left behind. Sound familiar? If you're here, you've likely found yourself in this same painful silence, wondering if pulling away will make them come closer. Will silence make them come back, or will it push them further away? It's a question that lingers, paralyzes, and keeps you up at night. Here's the truth. Silence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can make them notice your absence, disrupt the patterns that push them away, and even spark a change. But on the other hand, it's terrifying. You worry, what if they don't care? What if silence just gives them the freedom to move on? The problem is, we've been taught to believe that our worth is tied to their response, that we have to chase, beg, and prove ourselves worthy of love. But what if that's all wrong? What if silence isn't about manipulating them, it's about liberating you? This is not just another video about relationships. This is a revelation. Today we're going to tear apart the common myths about silence. You'll learn why it works, why it doesn't, and how it's not just a strategy, it's a transformation. We'll explore the psychology behind silence, the power it holds, and the surprising truths it reveals, not about them but about you. So stay with me. This isn't just advice, it's an awakening. Silence, when used with wisdom, isn't a gamble, it's a tool. Not to bring them back, but to bring you back to your strength, your peace, and your power. By the end of this journey, you'll see silence for what it truly is. Not a question of if they'll come back, but a declaration that you no longer need them to. Are you ready? Let's begin. 1. Why silence is a double-edged sword. Silence. At first glance, it seems like the perfect response, doesn't it? When everything else has failed, the chasing, the pleading, the endless over-explaining, you retreat into silence. It feels like a final, desperate move, the last card you can play in a game that has already drained you. But let's be honest, silence isn't as simple as it seems. It's a battlefield. Every second of silence feels like an eternity. Every day without their name lighting up your phone gnaws at your confidence. You tell yourself that silence is the right choice, but deep down you're haunted by one terrifying question. Will this work, or will it push them further away? This is the double-edged nature of silence. On one side, it feels empowering. You're no longer chasing or begging, no longer feeding the cycle of giving more and receiving less. On the other side, it feels risky. You worry. What if they interpret your silence as indifference? What if they move on entirely? What if they never notice at all? This fear is real. It's paralyzing. And yet, it's exactly why silence can be so transformative, not for them, but for you. Let's pause for a moment and reflect. Why does silence feel so powerful and so terrifying at the same time? Because it forces you to confront the very things you've been avoiding. Your own fears, your own doubts, your own worth. It's not just about them, it's about you. Silence is as much an internal reckoning as it is an external message. When done right, silence can be a tool for liberation. It's not about manipulating them into missing you, it's about breaking free from the poison of desperation. As Stoicism teaches, freedom comes when we stop clinging to things beyond our control. You cannot control their response to your silence. What you can control is the way you choose to use that silence to reclaim your peace. But let's be honest, silence isn't easy. It's a battlefield of the mind. Every moment you stay quiet, you wrestle with the temptation to break it. You want to send that one message that might fix everything. You want to explain yourself just one more time, hoping they'll finally understand. But here's the truth. Chasing them with words is like trying to hold sand in your hands. The tighter you grasp, the faster it slips away. Instead, consider this. What if silence isn't a test for them, but a transformation for you? What if silence is your way of stepping back, of breathing, of rebuilding the parts of yourself that were worn down in the chase. What if, instead of waiting for them to notice your absence, you use that silence to rediscover your own presence? Silence forces them to confront a choice, yes, but more importantly, it forces you to confront a choice. Will you use this silence to sit in fear, waiting for their reaction? Or will you use it to grow, to reclaim the version of yourself that never needed their validation in the first place? Think about it. What's more painful? The silence they give you, or the silence you give yourself when you deny your own worth? The double-edged nature of silence lies in how you wield it. When used as a tool for manipulation, it cuts you deeper than it cuts them. But when used as a tool for self-empowerment, it becomes a weapon of strength. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly felt at peace with yourself? When was the last time your happiness didn't depend on someone else's attention? Silence gives you the opportunity to find that peace again, but only if you're brave enough to face it. By now, you might be wondering, if silence is this powerful, why does it feel so unbearable? Because silence is a mirror. It reflects back everything you're afraid to face. The parts of you that seek validation, that fear abandonment, that feel unworthy without their love, those parts come alive in the silence. And yet, as Stoicism teaches, true freedom comes from mastering the mind, not the external world. Silence is your training ground. So is silence risky? Yes, it's risky because it forces you to step into the unknown. But the risk is not in losing them, it's in losing yourself if you fail to embrace what silence has to teach you. In the end, silence isn't about waiting for them to come back. It's about standing still long enough to realize that you never left. The power of silence is yours to claim, but only if you're willing to face its double-edged nature with strength, resilience, and clarity. Are you ready to see what silence can do, not for them, but for you? 2. The psychology of silence. What makes it powerful? Let's face it, silence is unnerving. For them, for you, for anyone. Why? Because humans are wired to fill the void. When communication stops, our minds race to make sense of the absence. Silence creates space, and in that space, something powerful happens. Reflection. But whose reflection are we really talking about? Theirs or yours? This is the secret about silence that most people overlook. While they're left wondering why you've gone quiet, you're given a golden opportunity to reflect on why you ever felt the need to make so much noise in the first place. Think about it. How many times have you chased after someone with words, hoping to convince them of your worth? How many sleepless nights have you spent crafting the perfect message, only to be met with indifference, or worse, silence in return? The truth is, we're often louder than we need to be, not because they aren't hearing us, but because we're afraid of what we'll hear in our own silence. But here's where psychology and Stoicism align. As Stoicism teaches, freedom is found when we stop clinging to things beyond our control. Silence is powerful because it forces a pause. In that pause, they must reckon with the reality of your absence, and you must reckon with the reality of your own strength. Let's break it down. Silence works on two levels: psychological disruption and emotional clarity. On a psychological level, silence disrupts their expectations. They expect you to chase, to plead, to fill the space they leave behind with your effort, your words, your energy. But when you go silent, it flips the script. They're no longer in control of the dynamic. Suddenly, they're left with the discomfort of their own thoughts. Why did you stop trying? Why aren't you reaching out? What does your silence mean? These questions don't just linger, they demand answers. And those answers often lead them to a realization. They underestimated your strength. On an emotional level, silence gives you clarity. It's not about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about stepping back and asking yourself the hard questions. Why did I feel the need to fight for someone who didn't fight for me? Why did I give so much of myself to someone who gave so little in return? What am I hoping their return will give me that I can't give myself? These aren't easy questions to face, but they're necessary. Because the truth is, silence isn't just about creating space for them to miss you. It's about creating space for you to heal. When you stop pouring your energy into someone else, you have the chance to redirect it inward, to rebuild, to rediscover, to grow. Let me tell you a story. A man once wrote about a toxic relationship he couldn't seem to escape. Every time he tried to walk away, he found himself sucked back in by the promise of change. But one day he decided to go silent, not as a tactic, but as a boundary. Days turned into weeks, and then months. During that silence, something remarkable happened. He stopped focusing on whether she would come back and started focusing on himself. By the time she reached out, he realized he no longer needed her validation. His silence had become his strength. And that's the psychology of silence in action. It shifts the power dynamic. It forces them to reflect on what they took for granted. But more importantly, it gives you the space to realize that your worth was never theirs to determine. Now let me ask you something. How would your life change if you stopped waiting for their response? What could you accomplish if you redirected the energy you're spending on them back into yourself? Silence isn't just about them. It's about transforming your perspective and reclaiming your peace. But here's the thing. This transformation starts with a single step: owning your silence, embracing it, using it not as a tool to bring them back, but as a weapon to break free from their control. When you stop seeking validation from others, you start to find it within yourself. And that's when the real power of silence begins. So if this message is hitting home, if you're starting to see silence in a new light, then let's make it a movement. Like this video and comment number 1 if you're ready to take the first step toward reclaiming your strength. Let's show the world that silence isn't weakness, it's transformation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Join this community of people rising above the noise, choosing themselves and discovering the power of self-worth. Together, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. Hit that subscribe button and let's rise together. This is your journey. This is your moment. Let silence work for you, not against you. Will you take the first step? 3. The 7 archetypes. Who might come back? Silence isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Its impact depends on the person on the receiving end, their psychology, their patterns, their view of the relationship. Human behavior is complex, and so are the reasons someone might return when faced with your absence. Understanding these reasons isn't about predicting their every move. It's about seeing the truth of what silence reveals. Let's explore 7 distinct archetypes of people who might come back, and why. The first thing to understand is that not everyone is supposed to come back. Silence isn't about orchestrating their return. It's about clarity. By looking at these archetypes, you can begin to understand how silence affects different people, and more importantly, why their potential return doesn't always mean what you think it does. The avoidant awakens is someone who spends their life building walls. They avoid emotional intimacy, often convincing themselves that they don't need anyone. When you go silent, at first they feel relief. They no longer have to confront the vulnerability your connection required of them. But as time stretches on, they begin to feel the weight of your absence, not because they've suddenly realized they love you, but because they missed the comfort of your care. The hard truth: most avoidants don't change unless they choose to face their fears head-on, and your silence won't fix what they refuse to address. Then there's the sensation seeker. This person thrives on the thrill of the chase, the excitement of novelty. They pull you in with warmth, only to push you away when things become stable. Your silence flips their script. Suddenly, you're the one who's unpredictable, and they're left chasing the rush of regaining your attention. But here's the problem. Their return isn't about stability or love. It's about reknitting the game. They're drawn to the challenge, not to you. The throne taker is different. This is someone who assumes your devotion is endless. They sit comfortably in their position of power, basking in your effort and attention, giving little in return. When you go silent, the foundation of their comfort crumbles. They miss the validation you provided, the way you made them feel important. But their regret isn't about love. It's about losing control. Silence reveals their dependency on your energy, but it also reveals their unwillingness to reciprocate. Next, we meet the ego bruised. For this person, it's not about love or connection, it's about their fragile sense of self-worth. Your silence feels like rejection, a blow to the image they've built of themselves as the one in control. They're drawn back not by genuine affection, but by the need to restore their ego. And yet, their return offers no peace. It's not about repairing the relationship, it's about repairing their pride. Then there's the hot and cold player. One moment they're all in, showering you with attention and promises. The next they're distant, leaving you wondering what you did wrong. They thrive on keeping you off balance, but your silence stops the game. Suddenly, they're left without the reaction they crave. They might come back, but not because they've changed. It's the same game dressed in new promises. Their return isn't about stability, it's about regaining control. The regretful realist is different. They're the ones who leave thinking the grass is greener elsewhere. But life has a way of teaching hard lessons. As time passes, they begin to see the cracks in their decision. They miss the stability and care you provided, realizing too late that what they left behind was rare. When they return, their regret is often genuine. But here's the question: does their timing align with your journey? Silence gives you the space to decide if their regret is enough. Finally, we meet the loss detector. This is someone who took your effort for granted, assuming it would always be there. They didn't value you because they never imagined they could lose you. Your silence disrupts this illusion. Suddenly, they're left to confront the reality of what they let slip away. But whether their return is about love or guilt depends entirely on their willingness to change. These archetypes aren't about labeling people, they're about understanding patterns. Silence works differently on each of these types because it forces them to confront themselves in ways they hadn't before. But here's the key: their return, if it happens, isn't the victory. The real victory lies in how you use this time to reclaim your own power. When silence reveals their true nature, it also reveals yours. Will you use this pause to rediscover your worth? Or will you slip back into old patterns, hoping for a change that may never come? The power of silence isn't in what it makes them do. It's in what it allows you to see. In the end, silence doesn't just expose their motives, it clarifies your own needs, your own boundaries, and your own strength. And that's where the real transformation begins. Let's keep going. If this resonated, the next step is to explore how Stoicism and silence intertwine in helping you regain control, not over them, but over yourself. 4. Key Stoic principles and takeaways. Silence, at its core, is a lesson in control, not of others, but of yourself. This is where the teachings of Stoicism come alive. Stoicism reminds us that while we can't control external events, we can control our thoughts, reactions, and choices. Silence is the embodiment of this wisdom, a deliberate, powerful choice to stop engaging in patterns that harm you. But what does this truly mean in the context of relationships? Let's break it down. When someone pulls away, ignores you, or even rejects you, what's your first instinct? For most of us, it's to act, to explain, to convince, to chase. We believe that if we just say the right words or try a little harder, we can fix what's broken. But this belief, though well-meaning, is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding. It assumes that their actions are within your control when they never were. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. What would happen if you stopped reacting to their behavior and instead focused on mastering your own mind? This is the heart of silence as a Stoic principle. It's not passive, it's not weak. It's an active choice to step away from chaos and reclaim your peace. But let's address the elephant in the room. When you go silent, it's not easy. It feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, hoping they'll notice your absence and afraid they won't. You question yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Will this make them care, or will it push them away for good? Here's the truth. Their reaction doesn't define the value of your silence. Your silence isn't about them. It's about setting yourself free from the cycle of begging, chasing, and over-explaining. When you embrace silence as a Stoic practice, you shift your focus from external validation to internal growth. You begin to see that their response, or lack of it, has no bearing on your worth. Take this example. Imagine someone who has consistently ignored your needs, taken your efforts for granted, and left you feeling drained. Now imagine continuing to chase their attention. What message does that send to them and to yourself? Every time you break your silence to reach out, you reinforce the idea that their behavior is acceptable. But when you stay silent, you send a different message. I respect myself enough to walk away from what no longer serves me. Silence also forces them to confront a reality they've been avoiding. Without your presence to lean on, they're left alone with their thoughts. This discomfort can be transformative, not because you're manipulating them, but because you've removed the safety net of your constant effort. Whether they come back or not, they're forced to reckon with the space you've left behind. But what about you? Silence doesn't just challenge them, it challenges you. It requires patience, self-discipline, and a deep commitment to your own healing. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, if I just stay silent long enough, they'll come back. But that mindset misses the point. Silence isn't a waiting game, it's a transformation. It's your chance to stop focusing on them and start focusing on you. As Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Who do you want to become in the face of this silence? Someone who waits in fear for their return, or someone who uses this time to rebuild their strength, clarity, and confidence? Here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine they do come back. What version of yourself will they find? Will they see someone who's been waiting, holding onto old wounds? Or will they see someone who has grown, someone who no longer needs their validation to feel whole? Stoicism teaches us that true freedom comes when we detach from the things we cannot control. Your silence isn't about changing them, it's about freeing yourself. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to their attention. And it's about embracing the reality that no one can take your peace unless you allow them to. So what's the takeaway here? Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a declaration. It says, I choose myself. I choose peace. I choose to stop pouring my energy into someone who doesn't value it. It's not about waiting for them to notice. It's about noticing yourself for the first time in a long time. If this resonates with you, let's make this moment a turning point. Like this video and comment number 1 if you're ready to embrace silence as your strength. Let's show the world that choosing yourself isn't just powerful, it's transformative. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Join this community of resilient individuals rising above the noise and reclaiming their power. Together, we'll explore the tools, insights, and philosophies like Stoicism that guide us toward a life of clarity and peace. You're not alone in this journey. Let's take this step together. 5. The hidden cost of chasing and begging. Let's step into the uncomfortable truth. Chasing someone who's pulling away doesn't bring them closer. Begging for someone's attention doesn't make them value you. In fact, it does the opposite. It erodes your self-worth, strips away your dignity, and leaves you emotionally drained, standing at the edge of a chasm that grows wider with every attempt to bridge it. Why then do so many of us fall into this trap? Why do we chase? Why do we chase? Because deep down we believe we're fighting for something important. We tell ourselves, if I just try harder, they'll see my worth. If I don't give up, they'll understand how much I care. If I keep showing up, they'll realize what they're losing. But let me ask you this, has it worked? Has chasing ever made someone truly love you? Has begging ever inspired genuine respect? If we're honest with ourselves, the answer is almost always no. Here's the reality. When you chase, you're not fighting for them, you're fighting against yourself. Every message you send, every attempt to reach them, every moment you spend replaying conversations in your head is energy you could be using to build yourself back up. Instead, you're pouring it into someone who, by their very distance, has shown they don't value it. Let's break this down on a deeper level. What is the psychology of chasing? It's not about love, it's about fear. The fear of being forgotten. The fear of losing something that once felt meaningful. The fear of being alone. But as Stoicism teaches, fear is an illusion. Epictetus reminds us, it is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about those things. The fear of their absence isn't about them, it's about the story you've told yourself about what their absence means. Chasing doesn't bring them closer, it drives them further away. Why? Because desperation isn't attractive. It signals that you've placed your entire sense of worth in their hands. It says, I'm not enough on my own. I need you to validate my existence. And no matter how much they once cared for you, this dynamic creates an imbalance. It turns the relationship into a one-sided struggle, with you giving everything and them giving less and less. Imagine a flame. When it's steady, it provides warmth and light. But if you pour gasoline on it, hoping to make it burn brighter, it doesn't become more beautiful, it becomes destructive. Chasing someone is like pouring gasoline on the fire of your relationship. Instead of reigniting their interest, it overwhelms them and leaves you burned. Now let's talk about begging. Begging takes the dynamic of chasing to an even lower level. It's not just about seeking their attention, it's about surrendering your dignity. When you beg, you're essentially saying, I'm willing to reduce myself to abandon my own needs if it means you'll stay. And what does that teach them? It teaches them that your boundaries are negotiable, that your worth is conditional, and that they can take without giving because you'll always be there. Here's the thing. Love isn't something you should have to beg for. Respect isn't something you should have to earn by diminishing yourself. A relationship built on chasing and begging isn't a partnership, it's a power imbalance. And that imbalance will only grow over time. But let's turn this around. What if instead of chasing you stood still? What if instead of begging you walked away? What would that look like? At first it might feel terrifying. Silence, as we've discussed, feels like a risk. But what's more terrifying? The temporary discomfort of letting go, or the long-term pain of holding on to something that's breaking you. When you stop chasing, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your energy. The time and effort you were pouring into them are now yours to use for yourself. You start to see the situation with fresh eyes, not through the haze of desperation, but through the clarity of self-respect. And when you stop begging, you rediscover your voice. Not the voice that pleads for attention, but the voice that says, I deserve better than this. This is the hidden cost of chasing and begging. It robs you of the opportunity to grow. Every moment spent trying to win someone back is a moment you could have spent building yourself into the kind of person who no longer needs to. Every ounce of energy poured into their approval is energy you could have used to create a life so full, so vibrant, that their absence feels like a blessing instead of a loss. Let me tell you a story. A woman once shared how she spent years chasing after someone who was emotionally unavailable. She would text him constantly, always initiating, always apologizing, even when she had done nothing wrong. She thought her persistence would show him how much she cared. But instead, it pushed him further away. Eventually, she hit a breaking point. She stopped texting. She stopped apologizing. She stopped chasing. At first, the silence was unbearable. But slowly she began to rediscover herself. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. She reconnected with friends she had neglected. And when he finally reached out months later, she realized she didn't even want him back. Her silence had transformed her, not him. This is the power of stepping away from the cycle of chasing and begging. It's not about getting them to come back. It's about giving yourself the chance to come back to yourself. So what will you choose? Will you keep chasing, hoping that your effort will one day be enough for someone who can't see your worth? Or will you stop, stand still, and let silence be the start of your transformation? The cost of chasing is high, but the reward of letting go is immeasurable. Silence in this context isn't just a pause. It's a declaration. I am enough, with or without you. 6. The transformation of silence, reclaiming your power. Let's be honest, silence can feel like the hardest thing in the world. It's not just the absence of communication, it's the battle with yourself, the war raging in your mind. You sit there in the quiet, wondering if they're thinking about you, missing you, or moving on without a second glance. Every moment feels heavy, like time is slowed to a crawl. The temptation to reach out, to break the silence, becomes overwhelming. But this is where the real transformation begins. Silence isn't about winning someone back. It's about winning yourself back. It's about reclaiming the power you unknowingly handed over when you started chasing, begging, or overgiving. Every time you tried to make them see your worth, you were giving them the power to decide it. But now, with your silence, you take that power back. Here's something most people don't realize. Silence is an act of courage. It says, I refuse to keep participating in something that depletes me. I refuse to beg for love, for attention, for respect. It's a line drawn in the sand, a boundary that declares this far and no further. But what does this transformation look like? It's not just about cutting off communication, it's about rediscovering who you are when you're not fixated on someone else's approval. Silence gives you the space to step back and ask the hard questions. Why did I allow myself to settle for less than I deserve? What am I truly afraid of losing? Is it them? Or is it the illusion of what I wanted them to be? How can I start pouring that same energy I gave to them back into myself? This is where the magic happens. Silence stops being about them and starts being about you. It becomes the foundation for your transformation, your rebirth into a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. Let's think about this for a moment. When someone pulls away, rejects you, or doesn't value you, it feels personal. It feels like a reflection of your worth. But as Stoicism teaches, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Their actions aren't a judgment of you, they're a reflection of them. You cannot control what they think, feel, or do. But you can control what you allow in your life and how you respond to their absence. Silence is your response. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's active, deliberate, and powerful. It allows you to step back and observe not just their behavior, but your own. In the space of silence, you begin to see the relationship for what it truly was, not for what you wished it could be. You begin to notice patterns. How many times did you tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or indifference because you were afraid to lose them? How many times did you give more than you received, hoping that your love would be enough to change them? Now you know better. Silence teaches you that love is not meant to be earned through suffering. Respect is not something you should have to beg for. True connection doesn't require you to shrink, to chase, or to overextend yourself. And the person who will truly value you will never put you in a position where you feel you need to. Here's a powerful truth. The moment you stop begging for someone's attention is the moment you start commanding respect. The moment you walk away from someone who doesn't see your worth is the moment you start embodying it. Silence forces you to embrace that truth. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also the space where healing begins. It's where you start to rebuild yourself piece by piece, until you become someone so strong, so grounded, that their absence no longer feels like a loss. And here's the thing about silence, it changes you. It forces you to rely on yourself in ways you never have before. Instead of looking outward for answers, you start looking inward. You begin to ask, who am I without this person? What do I want for my life? What kind of love do I deserve? And what will I no longer tolerate? These questions are powerful because they push you to grow. They push you to create a life so full, so vibrant, that you no longer need anyone else to fill the gaps. Let me share something profound. The person who thrives in silence becomes untouchable. Why? Because they've learned to rely on themselves. They've learned that their worth doesn't come from someone else's attention. It comes from within. This is the essence of Stoicism, the ability to master your mind, to let go of what you can't control, and to focus on what you can. And make no mistake, silence is not about revenge. It's not about making them feel what you felt. It's not a game. It's a transformation. If they come back, it will be because they recognize the strength you've shown, not because you begged for their attention. And if they don't come back, then they've shown you exactly who they are, and you can walk away with your head held high, knowing you gave yourself the respect they never could. This is the power of silence. It's not a punishment for them. It's a gift to yourself. It's a chance to grow, to heal, to reclaim your identity. It's an opportunity to become the version of yourself who no longer settles, no longer chases, and no longer gives your power away to someone who doesn't deserve it. So if this resonates with you, if you feel the weight of this truth, then know this: you are not alone. This is your time. Your silence is not empty, it is full of potential. It is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. If you're ready to embrace this transformation, like this video and comment number 1 below. Let's take this step together. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. This is more than a video. It's a community of people rising above their struggles, reclaiming their power, and choosing themselves. Join us on this journey, and together, let's rise into the strongest, most unshakable versions of ourselves. 7. What to do if they come back. The silence has been powerful. You've held firm, reclaimed your energy, and started to rebuild yourself. But then it happens, they come back. Maybe it's a message out of the blue, a late night call, or a carefully worded apology that feels both familiar and disarming. And for a moment, everything you've been working toward feels like it's hanging in the balance. What do you do now? Do you welcome them back with open arms, grateful that the silence worked? Do you put up walls, fearing they'll hurt you again? Or do you pause and ask the most important question of all? Why are they coming back? Here's the truth that most people miss. Their return is not a victory. It's a test. It's a moment of reckoning where you must decide what happens next. Not based on their words, but based on the clarity you've gained during your silence. Remember this. Silence isn't about winning them over. It's about rediscovering your own worth. Their return doesn't change that. But let's look at this realistically. People don't always come back for the reasons we want them to. They don't always return because they've changed or because they've suddenly seen your value. Sometimes they come back because they miss the comfort you provided, the attention they lost, or the control they no longer have. It's not love they're returning for, it's convenience. And this is where your silence pays off, because it gives you the space to see this clearly. So how do you know the difference? How do you know if their return is genuine or if it's just a temporary reaction to your absence? Look at their actions, not their words. Anyone can say they miss you, but have they shown growth? Have they taken responsibility for the way they treated you? Have they done the inner work required to break old patterns? If the answer is no, then their return is nothing more than a reset of the same cycle. They're not coming back to love you, they're coming back to fill the void your absence created in their life. And if you allow them back without accountability, without change, you'll find yourself right back where you started. Only this time, the cost will be higher, because you'll know better. This is where the teachings of Stoicism become invaluable. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When they return, don't get swept up in the emotion of the moment. Don't let nostalgia or hope cloud your judgment. Instead, step back. Observe. Ask yourself, does this serve my peace? Does this align with the life I'm trying to build? Does this person deserve the version of me I'm becoming? The key here is clarity. Silence has given you time to reflect, to heal, and to understand what you truly need in a relationship. Use that clarity to evaluate their return, not as a moment of emotional relief, but as an opportunity to make a choice from a place of strength. Think about it this way. If they've truly changed, they'll respect the boundaries you've built. They won't just come back with empty words, they'll come back with actions that show they're ready to meet you where you are. They'll prove through consistency, patience, and effort that they understand what you deserve. And if they haven't changed, then their return is not your burden to carry. It's simply a reminder of why you chose silence in the first place. Here's a hard truth. Not everyone who comes back deserves a second chance. And that's okay. People will always reveal who they are when you give them enough time. Silence strips away the distractions and exposes the truth. If their actions don't align with the words they're saying, believe what you see, not what you hear. Let me share a story. A man once spent months chasing after someone who had rejected him. He finally stopped, went silent, and used the time to work on himself. Months later, she came back, saying she missed him, that she had made a mistake. At first, he was tempted to jump back into the relationship, but instead he paused. He asked himself, what's changed? And the answer was nothing. Her return wasn't about love, it was about loneliness. So he chose to walk away. He wrote, "Her return made me realize that I wasn't waiting for her, I was waiting for me." The version of myself that no longer needed her validation. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just reveal their motives, it reveals your growth. It shows you that you're strong enough to stand alone, to make decisions based on what's best for you, not what feels easiest in the moment. And here's something else to consider. Sometimes their return isn't a sign that you were wrong to walk away. It's a sign that you were right. The space your silence created forced them to confront their own behavior, their own emptiness. Whether they choose to change or not is up to them, but it's not your job to fix them. As Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. If they still don't see your worth, that's not your reflection, it's theirs. So what do you do if they come back? You pause. You observe. You trust what silence has taught you. If their return aligns with the life you're building and the standards you've set, then you can choose to give them another chance, but on your terms. If not, you let them go, knowing that your peace is worth far more than a relationship built on empty promises. Silence was never about them. It was about you. Their return doesn't define your success. Your ability to choose yourself does. Because at the end of the day, you deserve more than someone who only values you in your absence. You deserve a love that's consistent, reciprocal, and grounded in respect. Anything less is not worth your energy. The question isn't whether they'll come back. The question is, will you be strong enough to decide what happens if they do? The choice, as always, is yours. Here we are, at the end of this journey, but in truth, it's only the beginning, your beginning. By now, you understand that silence isn't about manipulating someone into coming back. It's not a game or a trick. Silence is a declaration of your worth. It's the choice to stop chasing, to stop begging, and to stop allowing someone else to dictate your peace. We began with a question that haunts so many people. Does silence make them come back? But if you've been paying attention, you know that's not the question you should be asking. The real question is, what does silence do for you? How does it transform you into the person who no longer waits for validation, approval, or love from someone who can't see your value? Silence strips everything down to the truth. It shows you who they are, and more importantly, who you are. It's in the quiet that you begin to hear the voice you've been drowning out for so long, the voice that says, I deserve more. If they come back, it will be their choice. But your silence has already given you clarity, strength, and perspective. Whether they return or not is irrelevant to the life you're building. You no longer need them to see your worth because you've reclaimed it for yourself. This is where Stoicism shines brightest. It reminds us that freedom comes when we let go of what we cannot control and master what we can ourselves. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot control their feelings, their actions, or their choices. But you can control the way you show up for yourself. You can decide that silence is not about waiting. It's about rising. And let's be clear, choosing silence is not weakness. It's strength. It's courage. It's the willingness to sit in discomfort and grow from it. It's refusing to chase people who are running away from you. It's knowing that you are enough as you are without needing anyone else to prove it. Now let me ask you, what version of yourself are you ready to meet on the other side of silence? Is it the person who chases after breadcrumbs of affection, or the person who walks away with their dignity intact? Is it the person who waits for someone to realize their worth, or the person who has already recognized it in themselves? The truth is, silence is your opportunity to rebuild, to reclaim your energy, to become someone so strong, so grounded, that you don't need to hope for their return, because you've already found everything you need within yourself. This is not the end of your story. It's the start of something extraordinary. It's the start of you rising into the person you were always meant to be. Use this silence wisely. Let it be the fuel for your transformation. And if this message resonated with you, know that you're not alone. This journey, this silence, is shared by many people who are learning, just like you, to stand in their strength. Let's continue this together. Share this message with someone who needs it, someone searching for answers in the quiet. Thank you for being here, for listening, for choosing to rise. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to keep growing, keep learning, and keep choosing yourself. Together, we're building a community of people who are no longer waiting, we're thriving. Stay strong, Stay silent. And remember, your silence is not their punishment. It's your liberation. Let this be the moment you take back your power. You are enough today, tomorrow, and always. Now, it's time to rise.